Welcome to the Audio Spells production. Journeys of the Astropath, Michael. I am Cyril, and we are ecstatic to bring you this show. So please help us grow by following, liking, and sharing it. For more information and full credits, check out www.theastropath.com and search Journeys of the Astropaths on Facebook. Now, let us cast you a spell.
It's just after midnight. I've enjoyed a few glasses of Bordeaux. The neighborhood is quiet, calm. Really, my favorite time to be awake begins with the death of night and introduction of morning. I wasn't ready to talk about things before. I mean, to explain or go into the details of the events. To understand me, you need to know how it all began. And so if I am to be understood, I must go into a painful memory. I think I'm ready now. So Casandra and I arrived at Morten's in her Honda Accord, an hour before our reservations. She bought us each a margarita, rocks, top shelf tequila, Fortizella to boot. Near the end of the drink, she hit me with some news. Mikey, you remember the doctor? Dr. Smithson I was interning with, Casandra began. I nodded a yes, not actually remembering the name of the guy or anything specific, just that she followed some doctor around at the hospital as part of her training. She continued. So I've asked to be transferred to a different doctor. You see, something happened. Now she had my attention. I popped up from my semi-reclined, slumped position. What? She continued. It caught me off guard, but during one of my long nights following him around with the other interns, there was a lull in the action, a kind of deep breath in the emergency room, which honestly, at General, almost never happens. Everyone else headed for pizza across the street, but just before I followed them, I had a feeling there was something bothering Dr. Smithson. I doubled back to his office, where he sat staring at his hands behind his desk. Doctor? Well, is everything okay? He was tired. We'd been on shift for hours. This was different. Have you ever, he began, found yourself in an awkward situation with a coworker? I mean, it's never been the case for me. I'm always about the work, being the best I can for my patients, for my interns. But Casandra, well, first of all, how old are you? Me? 24 next week. He sighed. I'm 30. I'm single, and I'm attracted to my intern, like some horny midlife crisis doctor. I interrupted her story. But did he spin this web to catch you? This sounds like a lame bunch of bullshit. Mikey, let me finish, she insisted. And then she continued. I'd never looked at him before. I mean, as a man, I had assumed during our 3 weeks together, he was a married, mid-30s workaholic, but he asked me to look at him. And look, I did. I mean, I had noticed his athletic build, sharp Creole eyes, and compassionate manner, but this was why I assumed he was married. He told me a bit about his family, which is from New Orleans, mixed with many backgrounds of both European and African heritage. He seemed to have gotten the best of all of them. She paused, thinking how much to share. I didn't want to hear much more. "So you're dating this guy?" I said. "Okay, a boyfriend. First in a long time. That's a good thing, right? You deserve some downtime from saving the world. You deserve some happiness." "I asked for the transfer," she continued, "about a month ago. And I'm working with Dr. Berger now. She's a good doctor, and I'm learning a lot. Whenever I'm not studying or at the hospital, I'm with Terrence, Dr. Smithson." I'd love to say that I handled this news the way any supportive sibling would, that I was happy for her, that I was glad she was grabbing some joy in this piece of shit life of ours. But I've come to grips with the fact that that was not at all how I felt. I was jealous, angry. Oddly, I saw this Mr. Perfect as a wedge between us. I'd always been the only man in her life with any permanence, and somehow, I felt this was all about to change. I waved to our bartender for another round. Casandra corrected my wave by telling him no more for her, she was driving later. So I drank for both of us. The steak dinners were amazing. Casandra rarely ate red meat, but when she indulged herself, she enjoyed it. Bite by savory bite, she tasted every cut with patient, multiple chews. I was in those days a gobbler, cramming big chunks of meat in my mouth and washing it down with margarita swallows. I've learned from Marlowe to refine my dining etiquette and enjoy my dining experience far more these days. Anyway, the dinner was a bit hazy from my drinks. I laughed too loud, swore too much, traits my sister couldn't stand about me when I went one drink too far. And I think I went 2 or 3 too far. But I had gone from moody to enjoying myself to the extreme. So she went with it. Honestly, she was rarely hard on me and loved seeing me smiling and laughing, even if it was alcohol-induced for the most part. I paid, and we waited outside in the cool evening for a pimply-faced kid to roll her Honda up from the valet. I remembered laughing when he handed me the keys, considering my eyes were on fire and my face flush with my drunkenness. Casandra snatched the keys from my hand before I could finish my joke. "Guess I'm driving." She shoved me into the passenger seat, and off we went. We were rolling home pretty fast. Traffic was light and moving. My buzz was making my vision blur a bit, running light tracers from light pole to light pole. When my question came tumbling out of my mouth, it felt more like a hiccup, or the air one exhales bouncing over a speed bump. "So I guess you're in love." She looked over at me, her eyes catching mine in a deep, connected glance. "Maybe, but that doesn't change. We're all we have in this world, and all." I wanted to finish the line, as I always did, but my response was interrupted by a set of headlights sweeping across the cockpit of our car. "Casandra!" I shouted. Her head snapped back, eyes on the road, but in our path a vehicle was careening out of control. They had run a light going the wrong way and were fishtailing side to side from the middle of 3 lanes meant to head northbound, but they were headed south. I watched her make her choice. They were headed right for us, but there was space to the far left or far right that could avoid them. She'd have to guess. If they stayed straight, she'd miss them. She gently pulled the wheel, left aiming for the shoulder. I'd have done the same, but the vehicle, a gigantic Ford truck, guessed we'd go right or stay straight and jerked its wheel to the right and back into our path. The collision was a thunderclap, eruption of breaking plastic, glass, metal, rubber, a cacophony of scraping and screeching, and in the middle of all of that noise, I could hear myself shouting, "Casandra! Casandra!" Then the noise stopped, and darkness swallowed me. Now this is the hellish part. I watched this accident over and over again, but not from my vantage point. but as if I was sitting on the hood of the car and looking at my sister and I like actors in a film. I saw my hand shoot out in front of her, as if I could somehow stop the metal death that was crashing down upon her. I saw her eyes wide with terror. I saw the shards of glass slicing both of us, zipping into or past our faces like bees on a swarm. I saw the metal of the roof fold in on her head as if a giant metal hand was crushing her. I saw similar folds of the car, morphing into a kind of cube from a rectangle. Miss me, except for my head slamming into Cassandra's seat, and one piece of trim that, dagger-like, severed my reached hand's wrist. So odd that this lethal precision was truly the only bit of this collision's chaos that bit me. And bit it did. Blood began squirting from my veins, forming a water fountain-like arc that splashed upon Cassandra's face. And then the oddity, the miracle, the unexpected and unexplainable, as my sister's training took over, cutting through the severe head trauma she had suffered, acting in a state of shock, her eyes, zombie-like, pulled her tattered blouse from her chest and tied my wrist as I lay unconscious with my head in her lap. She pulled the cloth as tight as she could before collapsing. Minutes passed as we lay silently in a metal tomb for two. People arrived, scrambling emergency workers with determined expressions. Thick yellow jackets and swirling lights filled the cab. And then my dream would restart, like a video on loop. I'd see it over and over again, unable to affect it, change it, but forced to see it and hear it again and again. I awoke in the hospital after the accident rerun marathon, feeling as if I'd lost days. It had been nearly a day, as my loss of blood and blow to the head had been enough that they had not spared the sedatives. The hangover I'd earned at dinner was nothing compared to the one I had. Everything was bright. Everything hurt, especially my eyes, which seemed to have an Olympic sprinter's pulse beating in each eyelid. As my head cleared, I became panicked at the thought of Casandra. Where was she? My room was a single. Why did they separate us? Was she already up and around? Probably, I thought. And she'd tease me about being such a wimp and how I slept like a baby after she was up and out. I had an IV drip attached, but it had wheels, so I shuffled out, dragging the device beside me. It squeaked a sharp metal cry of resistance as I tugged it. And as I entered the hall, it caught the attention of a young nurse who was standing outside. She was shocked to see me, zombie walking out into the hall, and especially because I hadn't taken the time to tie the hospital gown, and it was slit down the side and parting wide with every step I took, literally letting it all hang out. I'm sure the nurse was telling me to stop or telling me something as she trailed along behind me, huffing and puffing verbal noise in my direction. But I was not going to be stopped. I was going to my sister, and like a child storming downstairs on Christmas morning to check the hall of the holidays, I was not going to be denied. But it was then, in that moment, that I realized I had no idea where she was. Casandra, I mumbled, and then, for the first time in my life, it happened. That crystal clear voice in my head sounded as if standing next to me in a movie line. Mikey, I'm scared. I froze, spinning around on a slick linoleum floor. My expression of shock and fright terrified the nurse who was a step behind me. She gasped. Casandra, I said, where are you? Mikey, I'm here. Our backyard, remember. The dark clouds surround it. I can't walk through. I've tried. Now, time and space are confusing for me here. They're confusing for every astropath, actually. But that's a discussion for another time. What I'm saying is, I had no idea that in the hospital corridor, I had collapsed into an unconscious heap, and that I was not traveling in space, but rather into the mind of Casandra. I appeared in the place she was seeing, our childhood backyard. Its brown grass and dirt patches and golden leaves of our neighbors' trees smelled like autumn. The rusty cube-shaped wooden fort we built of panels we had taken from box crates behind a market was in its best condition, so its first summer, my 8th summer. And low plastic swings that hung beneath a rusty metal bar creaked in the way it had that entire summer and fall. Until the snow came and our dad announced we were too old for it, and he had sold it for a few bucks to a neighbor. Sitting on one of those swings, her hips too wide for it, Casandra sat, staring at me as if I was a ghost. "Mikey?" she asked. "I'm here," I assured her, and tears flooded us before any logic or reason or theories could be put into words. We simply wept.